Welcome back, part 2 of me building a shed, more of a how I'm doing it than a how to, but you know, maybe it's of use to you, maybe of interest. And what I'll do is I'll spin you around and I'll talk you through what I'm going to do. Okay, so in part 1 I told you that my shed base is constructed of paving slabs sunk end on, filled with hardcore, compacted, raised up off the ground, and what I've now done is I've cut these timber bearers, 5 of them, to 3.6 metres in length. My shed is 2.4 by 3.6, so about 12 by 8. I'm building the shed base to the exact size of the base of the shed, so that once the featherboarding goes on, the water will just run straight down the sides with no risk of pooling or any splashback. I'm using treated timber bearers to raise the floor of the shed up, so there's always a continuous air gap underneath, and the floor is going to consist of 3 sheets of OSB board laid side by side perpendicular across these timber bearers. I've placed the centres at 600, that's okay with 18mm thick board. If you're using 11mm thick OSB board, I think you should probably use 400 centres. I wouldn't even bother using 9mm board for a floor. As you can see, there is black writing on one side of the OSB board. That is the side that actually faces downwards, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the OSB boards, waterproof them with a product called Blackjack. Now, this isn't sponsored. I picked this up from Toolstation. It's 20 quid for 5 litres or 10 quid for 1 litre. I need about 2.5, 3 litres, so it made sense to go for the bigger can. The irony is I'm going to have some left over, so I'm building a shed to store the materials that I use to build the shed. OSB board is water resistant, but it's not waterproof, so this stuff can be used to push into the end grain, consolidate the sort of crumbly moisture wicking nature of OSB board, because that will be the area that fails first otherwise. Because I've got plenty in the can, I'll do the underside as well, that's going to sit on top of the timber bearers, and for the roof I'll do the same around the edges and put it on the top before I lay the felt. It's not the most pleasant stuff. It's bitumen in white spirit basically, and if you get it off on you, it's not coming off. To that end, I've got disposable gloves and some of these multitask wipes which get rid of oil and asphalt, so same difference. You want to get it off pretty quickly, otherwise it's going to be with you for days if not weeks. The way that I'm doing the edges of the OSB board then is I'm just loading the brush up with a bit, scraping it off and letting gravity do the work to help it fill up all those nooks and crannies between the layers of the OSB board. It's quite flaky at the edges and corners, it's quite crumbly. Once it's in there and it dries, it's going to act like a sort of bitumen glue holding the edges together as well as waterproofing them. Better than anything like clear coat, which is quite runny. You don't want to be using sort of like cork or silicone really, and it's also better than anything water based because that will make the grain swell. I think sort of solvent and oil based is the way to go, as unpleasant as it is. What I'm also doing then on the face of this board is, I know everybody knows how to paint, but this stuff goes on quite heavy, quite thick, and I'm just making sure again on the face that any sort of like pits that you could easily miss, you just kind of really force it in there just to make sure that they're all filled up and make a proper waterproof surface. What I'm then doing is I'm painting the underside and the edges. This board has already been done, and then I've painted a sort of band around the edge where the framing timber is going to go, because I think that's like lapping a DPM over. It's just belt and braces. You might as well do it while you're there and get the base properly protected. With some 65mm coated decking screws, I'm just going to secure these boards at regular intervals. One every 600, obviously, along the length to go into the bearers, and one every 30 centimetres or so along the bearers to come up with 25 screws per board. And what we're left with is a lovely solid square base upon which to build the rest of the shed. Right, it's the same day, the end of. It's been a long hot one. I've got a very cold and frosty beer here, so if I slur, get things wrong, I don't care. I've got my knee pads on. I've got super hot sweaty knees. got my cutting station all set up, and I'm starting to build the shed. So come up to the end of the garden with me and I will talk you through what I'm doing, how I'm starting to build it. The reason I'm doing the rear wall first, building it as a frame and then lifting it into place, is because even though I left the gap at the back of the shed for maintenance at a later date, there's not really enough space to build the framework and put the featherboard on comfortably. So I'm just going to build it lying down, lift it into place, job's a good one. It's going to be a PENT shed, so that means it's going to be higher at the front and just slope towards the back. I'm going to have it approximately 1.8 metre high at the back and about, well, 2,160 millimetres at the front. That should give enough fall. Now, what I want at the back is for the featherboards to overhang this 18mm OSB board so that any rain runs all the way down and past the OSB board. 15 featherboards equal 1.8 metres with a 30mm overlap, so that leaves 120 exposed, so 15 times 120, 1.8. I need this framework to be about 20mm less than 1.8. That is so that I get the 18mm overhang, and I've added 2mm on just for good measure, so that's the 20mm. So 1.8 less 20mm is 178 centimetres, okay? So that is the height of this timber framework. Now I've run the wall plate at the full 3.6 metres. You can see that sits on top of the studs. So that means that when this is up, all the weight will be transferred down and through these studs. And I've put one stud at 600 centres all the way along, and that will give me something to nail the featherboard to. I'm using these Forge Fast screws, so they're 4.5 by 80mm. Now, I picked those up from Toolstation. The reason I like these, they're a little bit more expensive than nails, but they drive in so quickly. They're a Torx fitting, so you get a Torx head included in the pack. Whoa, which is brilliant. Hang on a minute, hang on. I just need some refreshment. They're self-starting, you know, they've got a cutting, self-starting thread. They're much easier to use than nails. They're about £5 a pack, you get 100 in there. One of the reasons that people don't like to use screws for framing is because they're not flexible. Well, these are tested for shear strength up to 35 degrees. Now for the side trims that the featherboards will butt up to. This will overhang by 19mm, given that it's a 38mm piece of timber. To attach this trim, I'm going to be using annular ring shank nails. So called because you only use them annularly. I've got no idea what it really means. And ring shank because it's got rings around the shank, and that means they grip much better than normal nails. 2.65mm by 40mm long. I will use that to do both the side trims and the featherboarding as well. Okay, so that's the first featherboard nailed in place with one nail about 50mm from its thin edge and in line with the trim at the bottom. And I've done exactly the same on this side. Now, you can see where this stud follows down. That will be the overhang. If I double check, that's about the first finger segment overhang to be in line with this bottom trim. So what I'll do is I'll just go along to each stud and I will just double check it with my first finger segment, and that'll be good enough for me. This is not fine English cabinet making. This is shed building with beer. I'm just going to get an adjustable carpenter square, just lock it off at 120mm and just set the next featherboard down to it. Simple as that. Nail it in all the way along, follow it along like this, just continue all the way up the rows. So with the rear panel built and lifted more or less into position, I'll just show you this back edge, and you can see, hopefully, that the featherboard now overhangs that OSB at the side and any water will run down the back. And I'll just repeat that principle across every wall of the shed as I get on and build them. I'm not going to fix this rear panel down yet. I'm just going to prop it up with a few pieces of timber, get the sides built to hold it in place. Only once the 4 walls are built will I then screw it down onto the base. That'll enable me to make any final adjustments and build things square. Right, this is the fun part where everything starts to come together quite quickly and it begins looking like a shed. You've just seen me cut a few of the timbers for the framing. I've laid them out loosely, they're not attached, so I'm going to start screwing those together. I've got the 2 side floor plates, I've got the floor plate at the front. I haven't quite decided where the front door is going to go yet, but I will cut a section out of that timber in due course. Okay, so the next job is to get the rear panel of the shed connected to the front panel of the shed. And what I've done is cut 2 pieces of timber, the same length as these floor plates here, and I'll position these horizontally between the rear panel of the shed and the front here. Right, we're getting somewhere. That's the studs in. The next job for me to do, if I just show you over here, tiny little bit of adjustment, just move the frame over. There's a couple of mil just sticking out here. This is why I didn't bolt the frame down to the floor just yet, so I'll just give it a hammer on that end, shift it over a little bit, get everything nicely in line. I've been building it to the perimeter of the floor, which I know is exactly 2.4 by 3.6, so I can't really go far wrong. Typically the battery ran out, so all you've missed is me putting in a row of noggins, and I've also put the feather boards on this farthest side wall. I've thrown in some vertical studs here with some noggins, and I'm just working out the materials and dimensions and so on for the face of the shed and where the doorway is going to go. I should point out that I'm not building this to any kind of plan or scheme. I am building it a bit on the fly, and it's all based, as I said earlier in the video, around the availability of off-the-shelf materials. So nothing is really sort of custom built. It's very Lego-like, you know. I'm just using standard sizes for everything to minimise cost and hassle. Just to show you where I'm considering putting the door, so one stud at 600, another at 600, and then where another one would start or be placed, this is where I'm considering opening up the doorway. So this inner pencil line here, with a 5mm gap accounted for, to this inner pencil line here is 1.2 meters, again with a 5mm gap on either side. I've then measured 45mm on either side of those 5mm gaps a bit further out, and then that's where I'll cut this sole plate out to create the opening for the doorway. That 45mm extra on either side is where the king stud will go, so that will be the vertical stud that will form the opening, the the timber framework of the door, and that'll be what the hinges of the door and the bolt attach into. I'll then put a header across and a little cripple stud above that, just to sort of add rigidity, and I think the 3x2 will just be better for a doorway opening if you're just having a single piece of timber. I'll do a full ledge brace and frame door. Now that sounds more expensive in terms of timber and more complex, but it'll be stronger, and I've got lots of offcuts from this timber that I've already bought. Right, that's the king studs cut and in position. The doorway timber bit of sole plate that I cut out, I've used to create this header here, and then I've just put a little cripple stud here using one of the offcuts of the 3x2. The next job is to cut the diagonal timbers that go from the raised front of the shed diagonally down to the rear of the shed. It needs to angle down slightly, so there's going to have to be a slight angle there, and then at the back there's obviously going to have to be quite a long angled cut. I know the distance from here to here, I know that this is a 90-degree angle, and I know the distance from here to here. And with those three measurements, you can work out not only the exact length of this piece of timber using an online triangle calculator, it'll also tell you the angle there and the angle of the cut there. That's the two angled front to back roof timbers now secure and in place. And what I've done is I've just cut a little noggin underneath in line with this first stud, and I'll do the same here and here, and I'll do the same as well on this side here and here, just to transfer the weight of the roof. Once it's sitting on this angled timber, transfer the weight down through the studs at the side. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of 3.6 meter long 3x2, and I'm going to span one between each stud across. It's just skewed slightly to ensure the top edge is running in line with this roof timber. I've also put then a 2x4 support under the centre so the roof doesn't sag. I finished off the angled featherboards on the sort of gable ends, if you like, of the PENT roof. Just offered them up, tacked them in place, and then cut them off in line with the angle of the roof. I wanted to talk about these OSB boards very quickly. The floor sheets are 18mm OSB, but they are the slightly smaller 2.4 by 1.2 metre sheets. These roof sheets, they are the 11mm 2.44 by 1.22 metre sheets, so the true 8x4s. They are slightly larger, 4 centimetres longer and 2 centimetres wider. See, I've done that to account for the slightly longer bit of timber needed for the PENT roof, because the angle means that you need a slightly larger sheet, and I've done it like that to get the largest shed footprint as I possibly can. Before I put the featherboard on, I just ran a treated 19 by 38 trim around the outside of the door, just to give me something to run the featherboard up to, and also to attach the hinge base plates to on this side. Just notched out this featherboard just to go around that trim. Where I've built the door 1.20 metre wide, the opening is 121, that gives me 5mm on either side. The opening being 1.8 metres high, I've cut this door to 179, so again I'll have 5mm top and bottom once the door's hung. I just drew a pencil mark just across, just on each one of these, and just did 4 cuts on the mitre saw, and then screwed these into place. So 10 featherboards on a 120 metre wide door. I'll just lay those out, thick side of the featherboard towards the hinge side. I've just put 3 coated 60mm decking screws, left 2 holes to put either an M6 by 100mm or an M6 by 75mm zinc plated bolt. Yeah, I'll retrieve that. So a combination of 75mm and 100mm bolts did the trick. There's a blackbird going absolutely mental up there. What I did is I just took a notch. Whoa, where is it? There it is. Just a notch out of the angle of the featherboard, just on either side, just to allow that bolt plate to sit flatter. And with the door hardware attached, it's time to hang the door. And it's really very, very simple, despite the fact that it's quite a big, cumbersome door. I've put a 5mm spacer in the bottom corner, so I'll just sit the door on those, and that will give me a 5mm gap at the top and the bottom. So once I've just lifted the door up and centralised it, I will literally just screw the hinges on, and that's it. It's very, very easy. With the door hung then, what I've done is I've put some 25 by 50mm treated roofing batten around the outside. That will help the felt project away from the featherboard and give it a bit of a drip edge, and also give me a vertical face upon which to attach the felt. And then if I go up the ladder, what I can show you is that I've attached the first lower run of the felt. The roof is 3.66 in width, so I've just cut this at about 3.8 metres, just to give me sort of 7 centimetres either side or so, just to be able to hang it over that roofing batten and give me a drip edge. I've attached it every 6 inches or so with galvanised 13mm roofing felt nails, I want to say, into this 11mm OSB board. I like to stagger the clout nails every sort of 150mm or so, and I do an up and down pattern, and that gives a good sort of bit of tension across the face of the felt, because it can be a bit tricky to kind of get it tight and pull the wrinkles out. If you work your way down, then you do the rear face, and then the last thing you do is this corner. You fold it over itself and then put a clout nail through it, and you can pull it tight and get the last couple of wrinkles out. I've had to buy 2 10-metre rolls of felt to put 3 lengths of felt on the roof, and I've had to overlap them by 17 centimetres, which is more than enough. I've taken advantage of the fact that it's warm to cut the felt, laid it out so that it's warm, because that helps it relax, that makes it easier to get on. So I'll get the last 2 bits nailed down, and then that will be the shed pretty much finished. Happy days. So it's just this last corner, just to sort of pull it tight and get the last kinks out. So what I'll do is I'll just pull that down and then fold, and then just drive 1 galvanised nail in here, and there we have it. The finished article, complete with roof and door. Just like a good shed has. So, thanks very much indeed for watching. Please do give it a like, subscribe. I'm probably going to do a couple of tweaks to this shed. I may or may not add a window in. I didn't bother just for security. In terms of a costing, I did say that I would give you a rough idea. The shed base, materials, compact to hire, the fact that the flagstones were free, all told, probably cost me about 150 quid, and I've already got my own cement mixer. So you might have to factor that in. Then the shed itself, I would estimate that's probably about 600 quid, and the budget should have been lower, but because of the price of timber at the moment, it should have been about 500 quid. Thank you very much. See you in another video. Take care.